Jim Dennis is a local treasure of the Bay Area with roots in the Fillmore district of San Francisco. He has been a resident of the Bay Area for most of his life and has been active in the commercial and non-commercial professions of photography for many years. He is a devoted practitioner of his craft and has produced some of the most significant images of African Americans in this day and age. Dennis, a native of San Francisco, recognized at an early age that he was visually oriented and was excited to discover that he could capture on film the elements that provoked thought and stirred emotion. Hi, my name is Raymond Holbert, and I will be talking with Jim Dennis about his remarkable career as a photographer. Welcome. Thanks, Jim, for being here.
It's good to be here, Ray.
You have stated in an initial conversation with me that I have always had a camera. How did you initially start out as a photographer?
Well, I think when I said that I always had a camera, I always had access to a camera. I borrowed my father's little brownie, and I was probably the 4th or 5th grade, walking around the schoolyard, photographing my classmates, looking down in that little brownie camera. And I was fascinated by the whole process of the image making, and couldn't wait to run my film to the corner drugstore and have it processed and come back the next day. And it took a little longer than a day. It took about 3 or 4 days, I think, in those days.
It was a hard wait. I bet.
And I'd get those pictures back and was just fascinated by the whole image making process. And I think I've been hooked ever since.
Yeah, good. I'm glad that you are. How about giving us a short, for viewers who are not as familiar, a little bit about your geographical background, for instance, and your migration, for instance, to the Bay Area?
Well, we moved to, my family moved to San Francisco in the early 40s, like so many other black families. Mm-hmm. I was about 5 or 6 months old in my mother's arms, and that's all I know is the San Francisco Bay Area, mm-hmm. until, of course, I started to travel and see the rest of the world.
You mentioned that there were 3 significant periods in your career when we spoke earlier. Can you elaborate a little on those and how they've affected your photographic image making?
Did I say that?
Yeah, those 3 periods. You said there were 3 things that you...
Probably divided into the early years when I was, stumbling around and trying to decide what I wanted to do when I grew up, and ended up finally getting into the Partry School of Fundamental Art. Mm-hmm. The Kodak years, and then the post-Kodak years.
Those would be the 3 mainly.
I think so, yes. In the early days before I was recruited by Kodak, I just loved music, and I would photograph all kinds of musicians in all the clubs in San Francisco at that time. When you could walk into a club and sit right up front with a camera and shoot to your heart's content. And all that's changed now.
It's quite different.
So that was where I was listening to Miles and Cannonball Adderley, and I was there photographing them, Carmen McRae, and these were all in nightclubs in San Francisco.
Yes, yes. Now this is initially some of the earliest.
Mm-hmm. That was some of my earlier image making when I really was in my training stage, I like to call it.
A good stage, which is a very good
where
stage.
I didn't know sometimes I had the audacity to shoot a flash picture in the club.
Very dangerous.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I remember Miles Davis giving me this look.
Oh, Miles of all people.
And I haven't done it since. All it took was a look.
That's right, and still today, that same
I put
practice.
my flash away, and don't use that. That's a no-no.
Yeah, we all know that now.
Yeah, we do now, but I was learning. I didn't know any better.
Most of the images that you produce are of human subjects, and you also produce a great many nudes. Would you talk a little bit about how you put your subjects at ease? So for instance, do you explain what your objectives are?
No, I don't really think I get into a lot of explaining about what I'm thinking about doing. What I try to do is it's just a form of communications, I think. And most of the people, most of my subjects have seen my work, and so I think there initially is a certain amount of confidence that they come with.
I know some people often wonder, what is he doing now, or how does this look on camera? Do you sort of talk to them a little bit?
Well, I show them what I'm doing usually. If it's somebody who's not familiar with the photographic process, and in most cases, if depends on what the use is going to be. If it's if it's a commercial situation, I'm doing a CD cover or something like that. Then usually there's an art director there, and we got a stylist, and there's just a crew there. So that's a little different than one-on-one. When I'm doing a nude subject, for example, that certainly requires a lot of trust and put a person at ease. But they've seen my work, so I don't have to do a lot of explaining. It's just that I show them where to get undressed and give them a towel.
Well, I would imagine by seeing work that I'm sure that must help the confidence of people, and they really realize that it's a very reputable photographer.
Well, a lot of people ask me, well, gee, how do you get these people to take their clothes off? Absolutely,
that's right.
And I said, well, I don't know, I asked. You know? Hey, you take your clothes off.
And there's certainly things that you can't show on television, for instance, which our viewers will be able to see some examples of some of the work.
Well, I think because of the nude workshops with Ruth Bernhard, it was just such a nice environment.
So that you took classes with her at some point?
Oh, way back in the 60s. And I was actually introduced to her by a mutual friend. And we both, we're trying to learn photography, and he had met Ruth Bernhard and was just so excited about this Ruth Bernhard, and man, you got to see her work. She's just great. She's dynamite. And I saw her work and just literally flipped out. I thought, wow, how does this lady do this? How does she get these images on film? They're just incredible.
She's a wonderful inspiration, I'm sure.
So that certainly inspired me. And here in California, there was the Ansel Adams, very strong influence. When I was a kid, a teenager, I used to go to a lot of museums and galleries and just was literally blown away by the work. How did he get a simple thing like a tree to look so incredibly beautiful and alive? And I would stand in front of a photograph and just stare, for a long time, just blown away trying to figure this whole process out. And I started to read a lot more and take a lot more workshops, and started to get a little better understanding of how this whole process works. And then I took maybe 20 years later, I started to understand the process, and started to get a little better idea of how you put that kind of excitement on film. And that kind of sensuousness and that kind of energy, and that's the difference. So I'm learning.
A couple of things I wanted to ask you that have to do with blackness in your work. Discuss how being black has affected your career, but if you could, include a little about the frequency of being the first through frequent occasions in your career. Often there are many African Americans who are in different processes or fields that find themselves being the first African American to work for Eastman Kodak, for instance, or to photograph particular events that might take place.
Well, I didn't really think of it as being the first at the time. Now in hindsight, I thought, Jim Dennis is the photographer, and it wasn't until I joined Eastman Kodak that I discovered that there had never been any black photographers, although I didn't consciously think of that. Well, when was that? That was in 1969, I think, when I joined Kodak.
That's what Kodak is.
And I was with them 68, 69. I was with them until 1980. And I thought, wow, where are they?
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely, yeah.
there was really not a lot of history there, and so I'm coming from California, going to New York, and I just assumed that there had certainly have got to have been some before my arrival. Hell, I'm just the new kid on the block.
Yeah.
And then in some of the travels that I and some of the assignments and projects that I worked on, you know, being the Kodak photographer, other people were a little more surprised about it when I show up. You know, they're looking around for the Kodak photographer.
Yeah,
I say, hey, over here.
Exactly, yeah. That's one of the reasons for asking that question, because even at that point in 1969, you still, and even today, you still find occasions.
Well, you know, you know, I'm so used to diversity growing up in the Bay Area.
Sure.
And to get out of the Bay Area, it's a little different. You know, things are a lot more, black and white, I guess.
I guess you might say.
It's really fascinating, you know,
Yeah.
because I remember going on an assignment to photograph cowboys in Wyoming, and all the cowboys were a little surprised when I showed up, you know.
Absolutely.
And so they wanted to find out who this tenderfoot was from the big city.
Good time.
And fortunately for me, you know, I was a little bit of a jock, and so I could ride with the best of them and
Which was good.
keep up with them. When I was in Rochester, I got involved with a community art workshop program, and a friend of mine was the director, Devon Shepard, and he kept insisting that I come over there and teach and share some of my knowledge and some of my Kodak expertise. And he finally convinced me, and I started teaching some classes, the very basic stuff, very beginning kind of photography, and moved the students gradually. And I was just literally surprised at the amount of information that I have locked in my head. And once I started, you know, I was a little bit, you know, unsure of where, how I could teach, or even if I could be a teacher. But I think once I started, just jumped in the process, some student asked me a question about some technical technique or something, and boy, I mean, I just started spitting all this information out and showing them examples. Most of the time, I've had some experience with so many different techniques and processes and the whole array of films and equipment and all that sort of thing. And try to keep it simple.
Sure.
And explaining the connection between the basic elements of design and composition and all of that. For so many years, I used to try to keep them separate, and you know, realize eventually that it's all,
they're all
the
connected.
same. It's all, you know, I kept trying to say
is good,
photography is over here, and drawing is here, and painting is here. And it's all the same, just different tools.
Yeah, isn't that amazing? You know, being in different areas, I feel the same, very similar. Do you think that an appreciation of your work calls for a trained eye when people see your work in general?
I don't know if you really need any particular kind of training. I think you probably need some appreciation for art or for you know, the image form.
Image itself, sure. Yeah.
I think that a lot of people are a little overwhelmed by my nude images that I produce. But I don't know. I think you just have to appreciate art. It doesn't necessarily have to have any training. I think if you have some experience with photography, then I think maybe you may have much more appreciation for my art.
There's been a shyness of imagery of nudity in photography in all public settings and in the media, inclusive of all ethnic and racial groups. It's often been claimed that African Americans are particularly conservative about nudity. Do you think that this is true, and do you find that much of your audience is intimidated by this nudity, for instance?
Well, I think it's true that African Americans are a lot more conservative than we are led to believe. But I think as a lot of people, especially African Americans, are exposed to what I do, exposed to my work, I think there's a growing appreciation for what I do, because I think I started doing a lot of nudes because I found it challenging, and it was probably the most difficult process. The human body is challenging to photograph, and that is to light it.
Absolutely.
And to shape it.
Sure.
To make it look as incredibly beautiful as it can be.
You've been to India. Can you tell us something about that experience?
Well, that was a project with Eastman Kodak to commemorate the 25th anniversary of India's independence, and the whole idea was to put together a photographic exhibit of Indian life and culture. And so I did a little research prior to departure, and got to India and just really had my mind blown with the diverse culture that exists, the costumes and the languages and the religions and the people, and every time you turn around there was something new, the smells, the sounds. It just literally just blew everything you ever thought about a culture. It just exploded, and I couldn't photograph fast enough. Every time I turned a corner, it was like a new adventure. Step out of this modern hotel and one of the intercontinental hotels, and you step outside, you walk around the corner, and it's like you step back 1,000 years. It was just awesome. Incredible. Unfortunately, I was only there for 2 months, and I could have spent 2 or 3 years. I have a regret that I hadn't had the opportunity to get back since then. This was in the middle 70s, and this show went into the New York Kodak Gallery at that time. And we literally recreated India in the gallery space with the Madras fabrics and Indian women in saris serving Indian tea, and it was a big, really official kind of opening ceremony with the Indian, what do you call them?
The local culture of New York,
Yeah.
Indian culture of New York.
But the, what do you call the representative?
Oh, the ambassadors.
The ambassador,
the ambassadors of
the ambassador of
India.
India,
Absolutely, yeah.
was there. Just phenomenal, and every time I look at some of those images, I mean, I really relive that whole experience.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm curious as to what percentage, I mean, you think about so many things to photograph when you're in a place like that. What percentage of your photographs do you think were used in that wonderful exhibit?
Oh, 10%.
That's amazing.
God, I shot thousands of images.
Yes, yeah,
God, I can't remember, hundreds of rolls of film. Well, you only have so much space in a gallery like that.
Yeah.
And we only used, well, I wasn't the art director or the editor. I just turned everything over to the design people. And but I was so impressed. I looked at those images and I thought, God, did I do that? That's what happens even now.
I was curious as to whether you could address how that works now when you have shoots or when you have subjects. Just
well,
what percentage do you actually end up using?
It's really an amazing. I'm still trying to figure it out. When I'm on a shoot and something happens, I think it's some other process takes over, and I'm having this. I don't know. What do you call it?
It's like a Zen experience, out-of-body experience. Exactly.
And
sometimes you're not in control.
You get into this zone, and something else takes over.
The photography itself is in charge, in a sense, or the subject, as opposed to you.
The photographic gods, I guess, intervene, and they say, "Hey, kid, step aside."
Yeah. I've heard people say that.
Or
in different
we'll work through you.
Yeah.
We'll work through your eyes and your hands, and I'm amazed. Sometimes after a session, I'll look at the processed film and proofs, and I wonder, who did that? Did I shoot that? It's just like, wow, I don't remember that.
That seems like a good thing to share when you talk about how you would share some of your experiences with people new to the field of photography. Would that be important to point out, just the fact that maybe sometimes there is a photo god that takes over and one finds themselves shooting more than they want to,
only
possibly?
after you've practiced, shot a lot of film, learn how to use the equipment, read as much as you can, learn about all the different kinds of techniques, learn the different products, the films. Once you kind of get some of that kind of experience, and it reaches a point where the camera becomes an extension of your eye or an extension of your senses. You become, again, it's almost a Zen-like process where you become so connected that it's a very unconscious process. You're looking at this image that's recorded in your brain, and you're looking at it through that viewfinder in the camera, and you're recording. You're recording whatever it is that happens to be your fancy.
But this has certainly been a pleasure. Your imagery has really kept up a tradition that began as early as the inception of photography, and I appreciate your updating us and giving us good insights to your own work and how it applies to your life, and giving our viewers a real good experience at talking with you and learning a lot more, I'm sure, than people are aware of on the general level. So thanks so much for being here.
Maybe I might have given them a little bit of what I do.
Sure, and we appreciate that very much.
Well, I was happy to be here and share this with you and the audience.
All right, and thanks again.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Great.